Welcome back to the show. Today, we are stepping right into, I think, the most expensive argument happening in engineering Slack channels right now.
Oh, for sure.
For years, it was the classics, tabs versus spaces, monoliths versus microservices.
The Holy Wars, I kind of miss how simple those were.
Right. Those days feel almost quaint, because the big debate in 2026, it's not about style. It's about your AI stack, specifically Codex 5.3 versus Opus 4.6.
It's the new tribalism, really. And looking at our source today, Codex 5.3 versus Opus 4.6, the 2026 Buyer's Guide, you can see why people are so passionate.
Yeah.
This isn't just about specs or benchmarks. It's a collision of two totally different philosophies on how code should get written.
That's the core idea that just jumped out at me. The article argues we have to stop seeing these as just, smart chatbots. It's actually a workflow decision. You're basically hiring a coworker, not buying a subscription.
That is the perfect way to put it. If you strip away all the marketing, and there's a lot of it, you've got two different personalities. On one side, there's Codex. It wants to get its hands dirty. It wants to, touch the repo, run terminal commands, check the diffs. It's tactile.
And on the other side, Opus.
Opus wants to lean back, hold the whole problem in its context window, plan everything out, and then write with this, supreme confidence. It's the architect to Codex's contractor.
So our mission for this discussion is pretty simple. We're going to walk through this guide heading by heading and try to answer the one question that really matters.
Which is?
Which one is going to save you the most time next week? Because that's the real metric. Not vibes, not benchmarks, but hours saved.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we have to start with heading 1. What you're really buying in 2026. And I think this is where most people get it wrong. They think they're just buying the model. The raw intelligence.
It's the biggest misconception out there. You're never just buying the model, you're buying a bundle. The model plus the harness.
The harness. Okay, let's unpack that. Because in all the hype about who has more parameters, the harness gets completely ignored.
And it's often the quiet winner. The harness is everything around the brain. It's the app, the CLI, how it indexes your repo, how it shows you diffs.
Okay.
Think of it like a Formula One car. The model is the driver, but the harness is the car itself, the brakes, the suspension. You put a world-class driver in a golf cart, they're not setting any records.
That's a great analogy. So for Codex 5.3, its harness is all about safety and execution.
Exactly. It leans so heavily into operational guardrails, sandboxing, preventing data-destructive actions. It assumes the agent is going to be running commands on your machine.
So it's like a coworker who knows not to arm-arf your home directory.
Yes. It has an undo button for reality, which is pretty important.
Whereas Opus 4.6, its harness is built for a different job.
Totally different. Opus is all about long context retrieval. Its harness is designed to support these sustained agentic sessions. It's trying to build a mental palace of your project and just walk around inside it.
The guide has this buyer's grid that I found super useful. It's a few quick signals to help you decide.
Yeah, let's run through those.
Okay, signal 1. Your team's motto is green tests or it didn't happen.
That's Codex, no question. It lives for that feedback loop. Run, fail, fix, rerun.
Signal 2. Your day is spent writing specs, PRDs, and high-level architecture docs.
That's Opus. It's about holding a narrative, keeping the story of the software consistent.
What if you live in PR reviews? You're hunting for edge cases, security holes.
That's an interesting one. The guide actually suggests that's where you might want both.
Really?
Yeah. Opus catches the logic flaws, the why. Codex catches the syntax errors and build failures, the how. They see different things.
And the last one? You just want tight diffs and no chit-chat.
That's Codex. It's terse. It doesn't want to be your friend. It just wants to close the ticket.
This flows right into heading 2. Quick verdict, who should pay for what? Let's talk about the Codex persona.
Okay, so this is the developer whose day is just defined by the grind.
The grind.
Bugs, build failures, refactors with really tight constraints. If you like what the article calls tool loops, run, inspect, patch, rerun Codex is made for you. It's a doer.
Okay, so what's the Opus persona?
That's for work that starts with ambiguity. When you need a plan before you write a single line of code, it's for, thinking work, trade-offs, migration plans, explaining the why. You want Opus in the whiteboard session.
But the guide brings up a third option, the relay strategy, the pay-for-both scenario.
This is the power move. This is probably the most effective setup for a serious engineering team right now. You create a division of labor.
So how does that relay actually work?
You have Opus draft the spec and the acceptance tests. It uses its big picture brain for that. Then you hand that spec to Codex. You just say, make these tests pass.
And Codex just grinds it out.
It executes and verifies. Then you can even bring Opus back in to write up the final review. Planner, builder, inspector.
It's not A versus B, it's A then B.
Exactly. It acknowledges that software isn't just one activity, it's a sequence of them.
Okay, let's go to heading 3. Fair comparison rules. This is a huge pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
I go on Reddit, and it's just endless fights based on these random one-off tests.
Oh, yeah. I asked it to write a snake game in Python, and it failed.
Right. The article says most of those are just harness tests. They're not actually testing the model's intelligence.
They really aren't. And the guide gives 3 rules for a fair fight. First, same repo state. Same branch, same dependencies.
Why is that so important?
Because if one model sees a newer library that makes the problem trivial, it's not smarter, it just got lucky.
Good point. Rule 2.
Same permissions. You can't let Codex run terminal commands and then compare it to Opus just spitting out text in a chat window. It's not a fair fight.
And the third rule?
Same success criteria. And this is the big one. Passing tests always beats confident-sounding prose.
The article has this metric that I love. Cycles to green.
This is it. This is the whole thing. Don't measure vibes. Don't measure how polite the bot is. Measure how many tries it takes to get the build to pass. That's productivity.
And there's a simple scoring system. +1 for finding the right file, +1 for running the right command first, +1 for a minimal diff.
It strips out all the subjectivity. Did the test go green? Yes or no? That's how you evaluate a tool like this.
Okay, let's talk heading 4. Real-world workflow. The article really gets into the nitty-gritty of planning versus implementation.
And the consensus pattern is becoming super clear. You use Opus for the fuzzy big picture stuff, and you use Codex for the implementation and the cold, hard review.
To make that handoff work, the guide suggests 2 templates. The first is the spec and tests template.
This is all about discipline. 1 paragraph goal, a list of constraints, runnable acceptance tests, and this is the key part, the scary edge cases.
You define what done means up front.
You have to. If you just say build this feature, it'll just build the happy path that breaks instantly. You have to give it the puzzle.
The second template is the review checklist.
Right, so this is for after the code is written. You ask it, does the diff match the spec? Are there any security footguns? It forces the model to switch from being a creator to being a critic.
I also saw a really clever trick in here about asking for a risk memo.
Oh, that one is gold. Before the code lands, you ask the model, if this code were to break production, how would it happen?
It's like a pre-mortem.
Exactly. And if the model can't name the risks, it doesn't understand what it built. And the article has this great line. It will inevitably invent them in production.
Oof. Inventing risks in production.
Yeah.
That is a terrifying phrase.
It's what we're all trying to avoid.
Which leads us to heading 5. Coding quality in practice. This shifts the focus from who's smarter to who is safer with your repo.
And it comes back to their defaults. Codex defaults to verification, sandboxes, risk mitigation. Opus defaults to coherence and completeness.
It wants the code to make sense.
Right. Opus wants the code to look good and be readable. Codex just wants to make sure it doesn't break anything.
The guide mentions a specific prompt strategy here called the 3 a.m. constraint. I love this.
I've started using this all the time. You just tell the model, assume you'll be paged at 3 a.m. for this change. Write the code accordingly.
And what did that do to the output?
It's amazing. All the fluffy, clever one-liners disappear. Suddenly it's adding logging. It's handling null states. It shifts the model's incentive from impress the user to protect the user.
That is such a great psychological hack. And then there's the edge case hunting prompt.
The single-shot probe, you say. List 10 edge cases. Pick the top 3. Add tests for those 3, then implement the feature.
Test the hard stuff first.
You have to. If it can't even identify the edge cases, you know the code it writes will be fragile.
Okay, heading 6 deals with large code bases and long context. The marketing loves to talk about million token context windows, but the reality is...
The reality is you still forget where the config file lives. A huge context window doesn't guarantee perfect recall. It's not the same thing.
So what's the solution? The guide suggests a 2-pass approach.
Pass 1 is map the system. You don't just dump the whole repo on it. You ask it to create a map first. List the modules, the entry points. Or make it write its own onboarding docs.
That's probably useful for the humans on the team, too.
Oh, it's hugely valuable. Then, pass 2 is targeted dives. You use the map you just built to navigate to specific files and run specific tests. It keeps the noise down.
The guide also warns about something called context rot.
Yeah, this happens in long conversations. The model starts to drift. It'll contradict itself or bring up ideas you discarded an hour ago.
Like arguing with someone who's getting tired.
That's a perfect analogy. The fix is to just stop, force it to summarize all the decisions made so far, and then continue from that summary. You're basically resetting its short-term memory.
Let's move to heading 7, speed, latency, and overthinking.
Yeah.
We need to redefine speed here.
Speed is not tokens per second, full stop. It is time to green.
Right.
It doesn't matter how fast the words appear on the screen if the code is wrong.
So why do they sometimes feel so slow?
They're slow for different reasons. Opus feels slow when it's doing these deep reasoning arcs. It's genuinely thinking. Codex feels slow because of the tool loop overhead spinning up sandboxes, running commands.
The article lists a few performance hacks. Ask at most 2 questions. Run tests first, then change code.
Constraints are performance hacks. If you tell it plan, then execute, it cuts out all the rambling.
My favorite one was the no narration mode.
Oh, yeah. Write only the plan and the commands, no commentary, get the code, make sure it works, then ask for the explanation. It saves so much time.
Let's talk money. Heading 8, pricing, usage limits, and cost per work.
This is where it gets real. For a solo dev, the hidden cost isn't the subscription, it's your frustration. It's how many times did I have to rephrase the question?
You pay in money, but you also pay in attention.
And attention is way more expensive. For a full-time engineer, Codex earns its keep in the PRs, being a disciplined worker. Opus earns its keep in those long architecture meetings.
And for teams, the idea is to use a default mode versus a deep mode.
Right. You don't need the most powerful, expensive model to just rename a variable. Use the cheap, fast model for the easy stuff. Save the deep mode for the really hairy problems. It's just smart budget management.
Heading 9 is the tooling matchup. Codex app versus Claude code.
This is all about ergonomics. Codex is built for agent execution and sandboxing. Claude Code leans more into multi-agent workflows and long chat-based sessions.
And the criteria for picking one isn't just the model. It's repo indexing quality, diff readability.
A huge part of what we call AI intelligence is actually just good UI. Can I easily read the diff it generated? If not, it doesn't matter how smart the code is because I can't trust it.
Okay, heading 10 gives us the use case winners table. I'm going to read the scenario. You tell me why the guide picks the winner.
Let's do it.
First up, debugging and bug fixes.
Codex, hands down. That tool loop is built for it. It sees the stat trace, it patches the code. Opus tends to theorize about the bug. Codex just reproduces it.
UI polish, like adjusting CSS or front-end interactions.
Opus. It has a much better sense of product narrative and aesthetics. It understands make it feel cleaner in a way Codex doesn't.
Large refactors, moving a bunch of files around.
That's a tie, and for good reason. You want Opus to plan the new structure, but you want Codex to actually move the files and fix all the broken imports.
And what about safe computer use? Database migrations, that sort of thing.
Codex. No question. The sandboxing defaults are non-negotiable there. You don't want a hallucinating agent with root access.
The article makes a great point that tie is actually a good result.
Because it implies specialization. If one tool won everything, it would be a monopoly. The fact that they're both good at different things means the market is healthy. You use the right tool for the job.
Which brings us to heading 11. Test it on your own repo. Basically, stop trusting benchmarks.
Exactly. Benchmarks sell subscriptions, but your repo settles arguments. You have to run what they call the mini kit on your own code.
Let's list the 5 prompts in the kit. 1. Bug fix with tests. 2. Refactor without behavior change. 3. Spec to implementation. 4. Review and hardening. And 5. DevX and docs.
And here's the secret sauce. As you do this, you keep a note. What did I have to correct?
So you're building a profile of its weaknesses.
Exactly. That note becomes your personal prompt cheat sheet. Next time you use it, you can say, hey, remember, we use absolute imports here. And suddenly the tool gets smarter because you got smarter at using it.
You're training your coworker.
For learning how to drive it. That's the real skill in 2026.
Okay, we've made it to the last heading, closing. The final advice.
It's pretty simple. The winner is the tool that saves you hours on your repo. It's a choice of style. The disciplined executor, Codex, or the high context planner, Opus.
The strategy is to run that mini kit for a week. Track your time to green.
And if you're still torn, just use the relay method. Let Opus plan and let Codex ship.
The article ends with a pretty provocative thought. It says, open a real ticket you've been avoiding. If you don't end the day with a merged fix, you didn't buy an agent, you bought a distraction.
And that's the reality check, isn't it? The goal isn't to chat with an AI. The goal is merged PRs. If the tool isn't getting you closer to that, it's just a toy.
A harsh, but very necessary truth to end on. That wraps up our walkthrough of the 2026 Buyer's Guide. Hopefully this helps you figure out where to put your budget.
And more importantly, how to get those tests to go green.
Exactly. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.